My name is Emily Johnson, and for most of my life, I considered myself a woman who valued loyalty above anything else. Growing up in a small town in Oregon, I was raised by parents who taught me that trust was the foundation of any meaningful relationship. Whether it was family, friendships, or marriage, I believed that once trust was broken, it was almost impossible to fully restore. Yet, even with that belief, I never imagined that two people I trusted the most outside of my husband would someday betray me in ways that would leave me questioning everything I thought I knew about relationships. I met my husband, David, when we were both in college. He was charming, kind, and steady in a way that gave me comfort. We dated for 5 years before getting married, and our life together, at least on the surface, seemed picture perfect. David worked as an engineer and I worked in marketing. We bought a cozy little house in a quiet neighborhood and often hosted dinners for friends and family. Among our circle of friends, there were two men who stood out: Michael, who was David's best friend since childhood, and Jason, a colleague of mine whom I had known for years. Both of them had become part of our lives, attending holidays, birthdays, and even casual weekend barbecues. I trusted them almost like family, and that's what made the betrayal so devastating. The story really begins one evening when David and I hosted a dinner party at our house. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a few friends, good food, and music. Michael and Jason were both there, as they often were. At first, everything seemed normal. We laughed, played board games, and shared stories from work. But as the evening stretched on, I noticed something unsettling. Michael and Jason exchanged glances that felt strange to me. I brushed it off, thinking maybe I was overanalyzing. I've always been sensitive to people's moods, and sometimes I assumed too much. Later in the night, when David stepped outside to take a phone call, Michael made a comment that left me speechless. He joked about me in a way that wasn't just disrespectful, but felt like an intentional attempt to undermine me in front of Jason. Jason, instead of shutting it down, laughed and added his own remark that twisted the knife deeper. I froze, unsure how to respond. These were men I trusted, men who had eaten at my table countless times, men I thought respected me. Yet here they were, throwing words like daggers while my husband was just steps away. When David returned, I expected them to stop, but they didn't. They continued, making light-hearted comments at my expense, disguising them as jokes. David laughed along at first, not realizing the sharp edge of what they were saying. I sat there, my smile forced, my chest tightening with every word. It wasn't just playful teasing. It was betrayal in the form of mockery, a public stripping away of the respect I thought I had from them. I wanted to speak up, but I felt trapped, caught between not wanting to ruin the evening and desperately wishing for it to end. After the guests finally left, I sat on the edge of my bed while David cleaned up in the kitchen. My hands trembled as I tried to process what had just happened. When David came into the room, I asked him if he had noticed the way Michael and Jason spoke to me. He frowned, confused, and said, "They were just joking, Em. You know how guys can be." That hurt even more. It wasn't just their betrayal, it was the realization that my own husband didn't see the damage it caused. The next few weeks were heavy. I avoided answering Jason's texts about work, and I made excuses when Michael wanted to drop by. I couldn't bring myself to face them without feeling a lump form in my throat. But one night, things reached a breaking point. David and I went out to dinner with Michael and Jason again. This time, they didn't even wait for David to leave the table before starting up. They made comments about how I was too controlling, or how I always needed to have the last word. The words weren't just casual, they were calculated, and they were said in front of my husband. I looked at David, hoping he would defend me, but instead, he sat there in silence, almost embarrassed. That silence cut deeper than anything Michael or Jason could have said. On the drive home, I finally let it out. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked David, my voice breaking. He looked down at his hands on the steering wheel and sighed. "I didn't want to make things awkward. They're my friends, Em." That was the moment I realized the depth of the betrayal wasn't just from Michael and Jason, it was from David too, even if unintentionally. He chose his comfort and their friendship over standing up for me. That realization shattered something inside me. The days that followed were filled with distance between David and me. I couldn't look at him the same way, knowing that he didn't protect me when I needed him most. I also couldn't shake the feeling of humiliation. I replayed those moments over and over in my head, wondering what I had done to deserve such treatment. But the truth was, I hadn't done anything wrong. Their behavior wasn't a reflection of me, it was a reflection of them. One night, after weeks of silence, I decided to confront Michael and Jason directly. I invited them to meet me at a cafe without telling David. When they arrived, both of them seemed surprised but casual, as if nothing had happened. I looked them in the eye and asked, "Do you realize how cruel you were to me? Do you understand what your words did?" For a moment, there was silence. Then Michael shrugged and said, "We were just joking. Don't take it so seriously." Jason nodded in agreement, adding, "Yeah, it's all in good fun." That was the moment I knew they didn't respect me and never truly had. A friend who loves and respects you doesn't dismiss your pain. I stood up, thanked them for their time, and walked out. I felt lighter, not because the hurt was gone, but because I had finally stopped giving them power over me. When I told David about the meeting, he was furious, not at them, but at me for going behind his back. That argument was one of the worst we'd ever had. I told him through tears, "If you can't stand up for me, then maybe I've been standing in the wrong place all along." He didn't have an answer. For weeks, our marriage felt like it was hanging by a thread. Slowly, though, something shifted. David began to see how deeply it had hurt me. He noticed how quiet I had become, how I no longer hosted dinners or reached out to friends. One evening, he came into the living room, sat beside me, and said softly, "I failed you. I should have protected you. I should have been the one to tell them to stop." I didn't realize how much it mattered, but I see it now. Those words didn't erase the pain, but they cracked open the door to healing. David cut ties with Michael and distanced himself from Jason as well. It wasn't easy for him. These were people he had considered brothers, but he understood that loyalty to his marriage had to come first. It took months of conversations, tears, and rebuilding, but we eventually found our way back to each other. Trust, once broken, doesn't return overnight. It takes time, effort, and consistency, and David was willing to put in the work. Looking back now, I realize that betrayal doesn't always come in the form of dramatic scandals or shocking revelations. Sometimes it comes quietly, disguised as jokes or silence in the moments when someone should have defended you. It comes in the form of friends,